What's up, guys? Just give me a second to get the other chat together. Oh, did it go live on its own? What's going on? There we go. Just a moment. Pretty excited about this stream tonight. Some of the best content that I think I have to offer. Sorry, I don't know why this other one's not going live. I just gotta wait. There we go. Okay. All right, now that we are live, tonight I am going to share mostly some experiences that I had for 7 days in 2010, where I was basically compelled, just compulsively, I wasn't thinking about what I was doing, to go out at midnight and go out into the desert. I was living in Durango, Colorado, in a beautiful, beautiful valley, waterfalls, and there were arrowheads all over the place, and a cave that had rock art spirals, and absolutely magical. And so I was taught a bunch of lessons about the nature of fear and given ways to neutralize it in a completely extraordinary way. In other news, I'm really excited tonight because we just received 8 peyote cactuses in the mail, and I'm going to do a boxing and planting video after I get off of here. So super honored and excited to have peyote cactuses to raise. So I guess let's just get into it. The first story that I'm going to tell is not directly related to the fear part, but it set it up, these lessons that I would learn. It was really the first time that I experienced something. I wouldn't say, I'd experienced synchronicities and precognitions and stuff, but nothing nearly on the level of what happened this day. So I was still on the fence about magic, and still in a way kind of am, but I had never done ritual work, and I just felt silly doing this stuff. So middle of the day, I have this voice in my head during this period that I call the Phoenix process, and it tells me you got to go out to the field and do a sun ritual. And at first I was like, all right, I'll play along, no harm. And I start walking out to the field where there's this big rock that I plan to go sit on so I could face the sun. And I had the thought that, I don't know any rituals. This is silly. I'm not doing this crap. And I pivoted on my heel to turn around, and my phone beeped. And so I pulled the phone out, flip phone, 2010, and I don't even look at who it's from, and it says, "You and your brothers will echo this gospel to the 4 corners of the globe." No, it's coca. And yet the sun shines on. And so that seemed like a very direct reference to what I was doing. Later, I looked at the phone number, and it was the singer in my band who's from the swamps of Texas on the Louisiana border. He does not talk like that. And I asked him about it, and he just went blank. And he said, "I have no idea." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I remember sending it, but I have no idea what I was talking about or why I did that." So interesting, right? So I go out to the field, and I sit on this rock, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? And that voice says, "Raise the energy." And I'm like, what does that even mean, And it was said something along the lines of like, stop playing stupid. You know what you're doing. Just raise the energy. So I sat in the lotus position basically and just started trying to like build the feeling of energy getting intense. And as soon as I was successful, rattlesnakes in the field all psh. And then it hit me, you know, something is actually happening here. So I'm like, what do I do now? And the voice says, you know how you figured out a little while back that there's a veil between worlds and everything gets reversed as it passed through? Actually, this is something I'm going to make a video about soon. The Pythagorean Illuminati have described this veil as a Fourier transform, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And with that context, look out for that video. It's going to be a trip. And I'm like, yeah, and it's like, well, what's your name backwards? My birth name is Harley. So I'm like, Yel-Ra, the name of the Egyptian sun god. So I start screaming Ra over and over again at the top of my lungs, and I see these purple tendrils like bursting out of the sun everywhere. And I just assumed it wasn't real, you know. The feeling was extraordinarily intense, but that's pretty much all that happened. And I walked back home. The next day, I'm driving to work, and I go into the gas station, and I see on the front page of the newspaper that there was the biggest solar storm in an estimated 26,000 years at the time that I was doing the sun ritual. So, you know, as skeptical as I was, a lot of those elements really suggested to me that something was actually happening there, you know. And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that I caused that solar storm, but it seems that whatever was instructing me knew it was happening. Interestingly, a couple of months ago, I came across a talk from Rupert Sheldrake, and he said that he feels that those solar storms are times when the sun is able to more directly interface with consciousness on Earth, which is exactly what I experienced. So at this point, my confidence has been raised in this sort of phenomena actually being real. And a couple days later, Sunday, because all of these cycles went from Sunday to Sunday, 7-day periods with a specific protocol and lesson, and this went on for 3 months or something. And so the first night, I just have this feeling like I got to go outside and climb a cliff. And I'm not exactly scared of heights, but I don't like to be near edges. I've never climbed rocks, definitely a phobia of being around just sheer drops. And we're not talking about like a, insane climb, but definitely sketchy, especially considering it's nighttime, and I don't do this really. And so I go out and I walk and I climb the cliff without any hesitation, without any fear, and I get up to the top and walk back around and go home. So nothing that crazy and dramatic, but it was still powerful for me to realize I could just do that. And I also knew that it would have been so much more difficult and dangerous had I been afraid. So I don't even remember what happened on each of the 7 nights or exactly what order they occurred. I think this was the second day. And this time I brought my dog, and I go out, and I have no idea what's going to happen. I know it's going to be some lesson, and that it's probably going to have to do with fear, but I have no idea what's going to happen. So I go right up that cliff again, and I'm walking around the mesa, and I have my little pit bull, Diesel, with me. I absolutely love that dog. He was like a little human, almost tearing up just thinking about it. So Diesel and I are walking around the mesa, and suddenly right at my ankle, almost touching it, I hear a rattlesnake suddenly. And I jumped, like they say white men can't jump. No, we can. If I could explain how high and how far I jumped, You wouldn't believe me. You know what I mean? Like, it was superhuman, just insane. But I didn't have time to be blown away by it because I realized my dog was going apeshit right in this rattlesnake's face. And I'm thinking, you know, he's going to get bit, and he's like my world. And rather than trying to grab him, or I just had this intuition that I just needed to still the fear in my body. And I did. And as I brought that feeling of like vibration, the best way I can describe it, just that zzz, you know, to a perfect calmness, my dog stopped, and the snake's rattle, the sound of it was perfectly synced with my fear disappearing. And my dog just stopped, just completely stopped and backed off. And like, the power of that lesson, it might be difficult to convey, but ever since that moment, I've had the ability to just grab hold of my emotions and just turn them to wherever they need to be. And I think, you know, in a shamanic or even psychological context, the intensity of the circumstances helped so much to make that lesson stick. This is why in the ancient mysteries, you know, they had initiation rites that were so terrifying that supposedly people occasionally died from fright. You know, these heightened ecstatic states do not necessarily need to be bliss and light and positivity in order to amplify the signal so that it's retained, you know. But it gets weirder. So I keep walking around the mesa, and there's a lot of rattlesnakes in this area, but I'd never seen this many. You know, they weren't everywhere, but there was a few. And I was so calm and so confident about this that I started going right up to the rattlesnakes, and they didn't curl up. No defensive gestures at all whatsoever. My dog would sniff them and stuff, and they, you know, because he is exactly mimicking, this is my belief, I guess, my energetic state. And we did this 2 or 3 times. You know, the snakes felt no threat, and we were in no danger, and I absolutely knew it with 100% certainty. So this voice in my head that I was dealing with at this time, you know, sometimes would actually just explain things to me, you know, and I'm fully, like, the possibility that it was just my subconscious, you know. I'm not saying that it was anything. I've never made up my mind about the actual nature of this thing, or, you know, it never identified itself. It never told me to do anything stupid or evil, though. And whenever I didn't listen to it, it was a bad move. So higher self, I guess, definitely fitting. But the lesson from that night, it told me, was that if you can absolutely 100% have no fear, nothing will harm you. Because when you have fear, you're drawing the thing that you fear to you. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So on the last night of this series of experiences, the 7th day, there's one other thing I'll share, actually. I don't remember, you know, where in the week this fell, but I had gone out and had like a meditation with the sun rising, and at some point there was a female mountain lion that had cubs that was in that specific area, and it came out and like knocked some rocks down, and I had been told on DMT one time that I would be killed by a mountain lion. That's how I would die. And it said, I will jump on your back and bite your neck. And I didn't know that that's specifically how they killed people at the time. So, you know, it didn't really bug me, but I also understood that that was another opportunity for me to test this. Not that it was likely the lion would do anything. But so I got myself in just the most calm, clear, blissful state that I could, and I started walking home. And at one point, I looked over to the left, and there are 2 bear cubs, like kicking distance. And I honestly think that if I had wavered, Mama might have ripped my head off, because I looked a little bit further, and Mama bear was like a little bit further away, but no way that I could have gotten, you know what I mean? Like 15 feet maybe. And she just looks up and then goes back to rooting I'm standing right next to her cubs. You know, so my confidence in this situation, and also my awareness that the universe seemed to have some real and true, universal mind and integrated intelligence, something that was orchestrating all of this stuff. And if you guys have heard, any of my synchronicity talks, and you also know all the stuff that had been happening leading up to this, I had tons of reason to believe that at this point. So, in fact, since we're talking about the bear, I'll share one of those synchronicity stories from the week before this started. I was at work pulling I don't even know what it's called, pulling plywood out of like a overhang, and there was insulation. And my girlfriend called, and I put her on speakerphone so I could keep working. So the other guys that I was working with, we were all friends. They were aware of what was happening with me. They'd seen a lot of it. And it was actually freaking everyone out to an extent. And so they hear her say, there's 4 bears in our tree in the front yard. And I got all these great pictures and stuff. And I was like, all right, that's cool, but I got to go back to work or whatever. And I hang up and I pull the insulation out, and 3 bear claws fall out from behind the installation and land on the deck. And I picked them up and I thought, they got to be like parrot claws, talons or something. There's no way that just happened. And one of my coworkers comes over, and I was like, these can't be bear claws. And he's like, the fuck they're not. And I had just eaten bear stroganoff at his house, a couple of weeks before that. He would know, he had just shot one. He's like, those are 100% bear claws. And we're all just standing around stunned, jaws hanging open. So, that kind of stuff had been happening quite a lot. And by the way, just because I think it's really important to remember that everything that happens in the universe, there is no woo, right? It all has some sort of way that it happened, conduits that are real. And my suspicion about it is that there were a lot of Ute and Navajo people in the area, and it may have been some sort of blessing or, protection to put the claws in the house when they built it. And it just happened to be that I happened to make them drop out after that phone call. So back to the story at hand. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and let me get rid of this jackass in the... Man, where are my moderators when I need them? Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. I'm demonetized, so I get nothing from YouTube. Talk about marijuana and mushrooms in Peru. Once I get through this fear topic, I might be able to do that. So the climax of this, and this is where I really felt like I proved it to myself. And, to be as objective as possible, I might have just gotten really, really lucky with this cop. But so a friend of mine comes over, and he's going through something, and I'm trying to help him work through it. And we walk out to the field, and we sit in the field, I think on that rock where this all started. And we're going through his stuff, and once we get to a place that felt resolved, we get up and we start walking out of the field, and I tell him, I just realized it's Sunday, and this is the 7th day. So I've been going out and facing a different fear every night, and like learning how to deal with all these fears in different contexts and stuff. And I just realized the last thing that I haven't dealt with is cops. And as soon as the word cops come out of my mouth, we see red and blue lights. We've been lit up for absolutely no reason in the middle of nowhere. I had lived there for like 5 months, never seen a cop out there before. And why is he lighting us up? We just walked out in the road. We're not doing anything. So that implies that this cop intended to fuck with us. Like, why did he light us up for no reason, right? So I realized what I have to do. I had told Ty that if you have absolutely no fear, the thing that you would be fearing cannot hurt you. You know, nothing will hurt you if you have absolutely no fear. That was probably the last thing I said to him before I said the only thing I haven't faced yet is cops. You know? So I walk over to the cop's window, and he's like, "Are those your dogs?" And I was like, "Does that really matter? We have much more important things to discuss." And I just started going off the deep end with him. I'm trying to remember the entire dialogue, but for sure, I said, "I have DMT in my pocket," which isn't true. I pointed to my house, and I was like, "I have like 115 more pot plants that I'm legally allowed to," like, ratted myself out for everything. And the DMT, he goes, "I've never heard of it." And I didn't really even have any on me. And he said, I don't care what you do in your house. And I was like, "I'm not in my house. I'm leaning in the window of a cop car. It's a felony to possess DMT. And he's like, you know, whatever. So I look over and I see Ty put his hands behind his head, like getting ready for the cuffs, you know. So I turn it up and start going even crazier on this cop, almost to the point of being threatening, you know, but not quite crossing that line. That would have introduced fear into the situation. And for either one of us, it would have broke the spell, if that's what was going on here. And so after Ty sees me doing this, Jedi mind fucking this cop a little bit more, the cop goes, "Is your friend crawling under my truck right now?" And I look over and I see half of Ty disappearing under the truck. So now he's thinking like, I'm gonna do this too. And you know, it went on for maybe 10 minutes, and finally the cop is like, "Cop is just a symbol. I'm a person, and I want to go home to my wife and kids. Can I go?" And I said, "Are you asking me if you can leave?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to go home." It's like, "Okay, good night, officer." And you know, I really do wish I could remember more of the specific dialogue, but you know, back then I wasn't thinking about YouTube videos or, you know, or even telling any of these stories ever again. So, yeah. But the main gist of all of this, you know, I'm giving you these examples mostly just to create the, you know, precedent for why it is that I am so convinced that we have this power to protect ourselves simply by not giving way to irrational fear, you know? And then I feel compelled to offer some advice about how to actually engage with those energies when they arise. And the reality is that there is no magic trick exactly, except conditioning. You have to consciously condition yourself, and you have to practice. And you know, everyone knows this is why I'm almost hesitant to say it, but the breath, I kind of think of it like when you see burning coals and you blow on them, they get hotter. The breath does the opposite to negative emotions. And the more you're able to connect with the feeling of that cooling and calming of the individual tingles in your body, the more quickly you can neutralize these things. But the secret, really, I think, the most powerful thing you can possibly do, aside from directly confronting those fears, you know, I don't know that I would advise taking it to the extremes that I did, because I certainly put myself at risk pretty severely in order to prove this to myself, you know. The caveat, though, is that I don't know that it will be as effective if you don't take it to those extremes, you know. I don't think I was just being a fool. There was a reason to confront these things on that level. But the best possible technique, very simple, As Aleister Crowley wrote in the Book of Lies, so falsely called, for mind and body alike, there is no purgative like pranayama. Pranayama, pranayama, pranayama. For mind and body alike, there is no purgative like pranayama, 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 pranayama. And so for this type of conditioning, I developed a really simple protocol that allowed me to quit smoking after, not constantly for 30 years, but I smoked my first cigarette at 8, and I think, or even younger maybe, and I think I was 37 when I did this, and I'd been up all night. But I just took 100 micrograms of LSD, went out on the patio of this place, and beautiful place, Mendocino County, oceanside cabin. It was amazing. And on the inhalation, you're focusing on the new program that you want to write, and then you retain the breath for a count of 4. So everything is in a count of 4, because when you're trying to create a foundation for something, you need 4 points, right? Like in the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, an ayahuasca circle, Lakota, Sundance, whoever, everywhere. You know, there's a circle that defines the universe or the microcosm of the magician, and it's his job to manage the energies in there. And then almost always the 4 directions are acknowledged, or the 4 elements, or 4 archangels, or 4 fundamental forces of physics. You know, all of the foundational things are 4, and there's a reason for that. So this is why it's the 4-fold breath, for creating this foundation and stability so that the work that you're doing has substance. And holding the breath for 4, exhaling for 4, while exhaling, you try your best to conjure up, if it's fear, the feeling of releasing fear. First, you have to generate it and then release it. I would even try to visualize like black negative energy coming out of my mouth while I would do this. And then you keep it distended. Hold the breath out for a count of 4. And pranayama is an accelerated form of meditation because of the inundation of oxygen and then the deprivation, and then swinging this pendulum back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And when you are thinking about the new program that you want to write as you're inhaling and then retaining the oxygen, the brain is flooded with the fuel it needs to build new neural pathways and neurogenesis. And if you take an LSD, psilocybin, or any one of these compounds that enhances that neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, flooding it with oxygen is going to allow it to actually take advantage of this heightened ability to write new programs. And then the deprivation phase is accelerating your access to higher states of consciousness. So I did this for like an hour, and I forgot that I smoked. I found my pouch of tobacco in my pocket at like 7 in the evening, and I was like, oh my God. You know, up until this moment, for decades, I would roll a cigarette right after I had my coffee, and I did not even think about it once. So that was actually something that during this Phoenix process period, every time I received one of these lessons, I would go home and run through the experience, the memories, in a way that made them conform to this cube, this square breathing process. And that's really it, you know, I mean. Yeah, I know. I've really been trying to cut down on chewing coca during streams, but we are moving unexpectedly, and the retreat is starting in a few days. The first guest is arriving the day after tomorrow. So I am just sleep deprived a little bit. So where are we at with this story? Yeah, I mean, I was offering the basic techniques that you can use, and the reality is there's nothing more to it than that, you know? What I'm really trying to convey in this stream is the importance of actually doing it, you know? I think a lot of people tell themselves stuff, and then they wonder why they don't retain it, because they don't understand enough about how we write patterns, programs in our biocomputer. And when we think about psychedelics and meditation and these mind-expanding processes, you have to upgrade your hardware in order to run better software, right? And so it's an absolute miracle that substances, indole ring psychedelics and, ketamine even enhances the neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. The fact that these compounds that expand consciousness actually have the capacity to allow you to rewire the hardware is just absolutely marvelous. It's a literal miracle, But the reality is that you have to avail yourself of these techniques. Another thing that you can do that will really help to make sure this stuff is retained. In South America, all the indigenous groups claim that they started everything, and so I've been told that the shuar are the source of this practice, but Mapacho tobacco has 16 times as much nicotine as, like average commercial tobacco. And it also has harmala alkaloids, the same type of compounds that are found in ayahuasca. Not to the extent that they're going to cause telepathy and, ayahuasca doesn't cause visions, but it is intoxicating on its own. So not like that. And you pour some into the hand, and then you take it through the nostrils. And to a person that has, grown up in a society that abuses tobacco and thinks of it as this source of death and disease and addiction, it sounds terrible, but it actually tastes delicious when it drips. I mean, it's amazing. It's the most earthy, like masculine, the best parts of masculinity and like campfire, just all concentrated into this amazing tea. And it kills parasites and has a lot of other, in the Ecuadorian Amazon where I was, it was probably the most highly prized medicinal plant, and the shuar as well. Lots of different tribes. So the practice for the shuar is before ayahuasca is consumed, this tobacco, not enough to purge or anything, but because you are focusing on your prayer for that night, you are focusing on your intention, you are formulating your will. And that is how, our mind interfaces with reality, is through electromagnetic interaction. So focusing that bandwidth to laser precision, it's just so much more powerful. And so in order to focus going into the ayahuasca, but then also to close the ceremony, the tobacco is given again so that the brain locks everything into place as it is at that moment. And, people talk about integration a lot, and it's super important for sure, but that Mapacho tea, there's no better tool for assuring that you're going to retain this stuff. So if you have access to it, you can order it online. Rapé, certain types of rapé are extremely good for this as well. But this, it sounds simple, but the information I just gave you is the most effective way to create new habits and to rewrite old ones and to make conscious engineering choices regarding your own biocomputer. The other thing that I can offer that is tremendously powerful and important, everyone should always do this, but in most Western mystery fraternities or schools, I guess, the OTO and the, all of these traditions, you guys have probably heard of it. Lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'll give you an outline in case you're not familiar. It starts with the fourfold breath and rising through the planes so that you merge with the Godhead, right? And the idea in this system, the Adam Kadmon from Kabbalah, is the giant organism of which planets and stars are particles, right? And we are microcosmic reflections of that. And so just as this is the creator of this universe, we have that in miniature. And so we merge with that first to identify ourselves with it, because also in this way of thinking, not so much Kabbalah, but Hermetic mystery lineages, we are not subservient to any god. We're not, a single consciousness exploded. We're all fragments of that, and therefore equal to all the rest of it. A cell in my hand is not higher or lower in hierarchy than a cell in my knee. And that's how it's kind of viewed. And so this is a reminder that you are God of your world. And so the circle is cast, and the circle determines what is allowed to be in your universe and what must remain outside of it. And then pentagrams are created with drawing in the air and visualized in the mind. And the pentagram is a protective shape. A lot of people think it's evil, but that's because all of these symbols of power were deliberately demonized by the church a long time ago. In fact, since I just brought that up, I'm going to deviate for a second and share this with you guys. I don't know how I missed this all these years, but I was reading something about Ishtar the other day, and her father, his name was Sin, and that's where the word sin comes from in the Bible. And he was a horned god of wisdom. It's weird how they're always demonizing these horned gods of wisdom, like Lucifer, the light bearer. There's no record anywhere that says he had horns, but it's the same thing. The demonization of enlightenment, of higher consciousness, of consciousness itself, to make people subconsciously fear becoming illuminated, because you can't control illuminated people, right? So sin, even though it's a moon god, gave birth to the sun somehow in this mythology. The sun is Helios, that's hell. Sin creates hell, Helios. So that's where they got that whole concept. It's just this Babylonian myth. Anyways, speaking of demonizing things that shouldn't be demonized, the way that I do this ritual, I didn't mention this in the beginning, is to draw the pentagrams pointing down, the inverted pentagram, because that actually symbolizes the light or the consciousness descending into matter. And if you're banishing, which you do at night, you draw them up, because you're sending all of this stuff that doesn't serve you back up into the universe. And so there are 4 pentagrams around the circle. There's an invocation of 4 archangels that aren't necessarily meant to be taken as literal angels. They're more like archetypes or frequencies or emissions of consciousness. Each direction has also a god name, Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton, or Adonai, which means Lord, or Eheye, which they say is the thought that created the universe. That it was the moment that this consciousness became aware that it was there, that was the thing that catalyzed the rest of creation, the logos. So Adonai, Eheye, I am that I am, Agala, and then the archangels, and you're acknowledging the directions. And so all of your stuff that you want in your world, that is related to the Tetragrammaton, that is related to the element of fire, sexuality, creativity, air is the intellect, water, emotions, and these are all designated with directions that also have symbolic meaning. And then you have these archangels, and so what you're doing is making associations and correspondences with all the stuff in your being that in the morning you want in, you draw it in through this process, and at night you send all the stuff that's related to all of these symbols back and out of your universe, so that it can be transmuted by the Most High into something more useful than trauma and aggravation and whatever else you're dealing with. And so the beauty of this really also is that even if you think magic is ridiculous, just to go through this process of having a brief clearing meditation and identifying yourself with power, and then organizing every different facet of your consciousness, emotions, intellect, all of this stuff, consciously willing how that is going to manifest that day. And so then banishing fear and sloth and all this stuff at night, even if it's just a meditation, there's no better way to have clarity and define yourself, and to become God of your universe. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, whoever came up with it was an absolute genius. And the way I understand these things now, I don't think it's really a person, it's was a person, but they were someone that could suspend the filters in their conscious mind and receive information from the subconscious and the greater universal mind, I would bet. Have you tried iboga? No, I have not, but I did drink sananga for the first time the other day, and it does contain ibogaine, but I think in very small quantities. Speaking of fear, sananga is something that I think also is very powerful for addressing this kind of stuff. It's best to take the eye drops at the very peak of an ayahuasca experience. The visions become extremely lucid and clear, and you have this feeling of being cleaned inside in a way that is indescribable. It does not feel like the chemical effect of a drug. And the Quechua word for what it's dissolving is panema, which is something like lack of motivation. You know, the Matsi shaman that was here the other day that served it to me, the same thing, you know, and they had no contact with anybody until recently. So, you know, when you see these different tribes that have the same exact use for these plants, pretty good indicator that it's true. And honestly, sananga has only had that effect on me the first time I took it, which suggests that it does this work, and then it's done, you know? So I still will take it every now and then, but the feeling of having all of this stuff dissolved only happened the first time. So as far as plant medicine goes, that's another fabulous tool for really dissolving anything in you that doesn't serve you. Robert Patrick, how's it going, man? Okay, so I have to go plant peyote cactuses and make a video, but if you guys have any questions or anything else you'd like me to address in the next few minutes, I do have some lag, so it takes me a second to answer. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A, I guess, but also I want to mention we have one more spot in the September retreat for the entire month. We have one empty room, and I would like to see that room filled. And then November, we have the Morel. It's going to be also plant medicine and magic, but it's mushroom season, so we'll be going out foraging for morels and medicinals and other edibles. And then in May, we're going to the Amazon rainforest in Manu, which is some of the most pristine rainforest left in the world. And that one is filling up quickly, so even though it's a long ways out, if you would like to attend, you should make a deposit soon. So let's see, I don't see any questions. Q&A, going once, going twice. Oh, like button, please. Share the videos, and one more plug. With Patreon, I'm demonetized, so algorithm doesn't push my stuff, and I rely on my community to make it possible for me to spend time editing videos and paying shamans to tell me stuff. Okay, I don't see any questions popping up in either of the chats, so I hope this was of use to you guys. You know, the advice is simple, but it's effective, you know. That's really the solution. And it's not even about that, really. At the end of the day, it's about recognizing the importance of this, and also that there is a path to succeeding at it. You know, that on a personal level, I grew up with a single mom that was constantly like anxiety, just like losing her fucking mind all the time. And as a child, I absorbed that because that's what happens. And so, you know, for me to have resolved that using these techniques and experiences, I mean, it was debilitating for, you know, half of my life. And with relatively brief engagement in these processes, the amount of liberation that I was able to attain, you know, it's crazy because it's not even a thing for me after that, you know. So best of luck to you guys as well, because this is a tremendous opportunity, you know, if you haven't been thinking about this, to integrate it and do something about it. I meet so many people and hear from so many people because I do consultations and something like life coaching. I don't like to call it that, but I guess at the end of the day, that's what happens. Fear, irrational fear, plays such a massive role in limiting the experience and the potential of people. Being afraid also makes you dumber. You lose IQ points when you're scared. Why do you think the Matrix is trying to scare the shit out of everybody all the time? You know what I mean? You lose cognitive capacity. So, your fundamental objective, if you are working towards any kind of spiritual reality, and really, life at all, it shouldn't even be a true statement that there are so many people that don't have a spiritual dimension to worry about. I'm sure that's none of you guys, though, but you hear what I'm saying. This is so important, and your life will transform so much if you are able to eliminate these dissonance patterns or interference patterns. That's really a good way to think about it. My experience of, I don't know what to call it, magical development or awakening or whatever, as long as you actually put in the work to economize and maximize and, make investitures of your experiences in a reasonable and substantial way, you are eliminating interference patterns that are stopping you from becoming a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven. And that's, a poetic way of saying that I think we really are suspending filters in our mind when we drink plant medicine or whatever other modality of, transcendental consciousness we're accessing, and fear is the number one interference pattern that will stop that connection from occurring. And if it does occur and you have this kind of stuff in the way, it'll become integrated in it and it'll corrupt and distort the transmissions you're receiving. This is why religions exist. This is why cults exist, because if you are able to still maintain that connection and you have not done the work to make yourself clear and to resolve your traumas and to integrate your shadow and individuation and all of these things that are essential to this process, you're just going to make a mess of shit. Trust me. I acquired too much power before I had wisdom to understand how to make it would have almost been better if I hadn't accessed this stuff until I had prepared more fertile soil without toxic energies in it. I didn't do that. It was kind of a mess. No, I'm sorry. Somebody just noticed that part 4, when it should be part 3, but that's because I decided I just didn't want to do the topic for part 3. The thumbnail's already made, and the description, it's all set up. But I put that off, I think, until tomorrow or later on in the week, just because I wanted to address this, partly because someone in my community that just attended a retreat had asked me about this subject, and so it's partly doing that for her, and also just because that's the energy I was feeling. So yeah, it's out of sequence, and I don't really apologize because it's just going to be another day or something. So let me see. Do we have any questions? Finally, that's it. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. Join the Illuminati. You get access to 6 years of premium content. We can do FaceTime for flow state, lifestyle consultations, magic instruction, guitar lessons, whatever I can help you with. And also we have a Discord voice chat for people at the $10 tier or higher. It usually happens Monday night, sometimes Saturday, because we have people in other parts of the world. So in the middle of the day on the weekend is better for them. So anyways, thank you guys all so much, and best of luck with this. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That's just so much more true than most people can, without these kind of transcendental experiences to tune you in to how things actually work. The normal muggle can't believe that this is how things happen, but it is. So, well, thank you, John. That's very nice to hear. Always good to find out. Do you think high doses of, there's a heart blocking of LSD can be damaging to some people? Fuck yeah, they can. Ayahuasca can be damaging to some people. There are, even people that have unusually high serotonin levels that will not survive ayahuasca. It's like, a very rare condition, and there is a test for it, I've discovered. But there's at least like 16 cases of that, And then LSD, if you are predisposed to mental illness, it can trigger it. Although the evidence is kind of conflicting. Somebody actually lied to me once, because if you are schizophrenic, we can't allow you to attend retreats. It's just kind of an automatic disqualifier. So he lied, and he didn't tell me until we were halfway through, and it did him tremendous good. So, I mean, it's a rough call, what exactly the protocol is, because denying people that could be helped sucks, But anyways, more directly to the point, it's not really, in my opinion, about high doses or low doses. It can be just that some people's ego, the archetype, the disposition, the specificity of their traumas that have influenced, how sometimes psychedelics blow that up. The ego inflation, can be extraordinary. I've actually noticed with ayahuasca that whereas psilocybin and some other psychedelics tend to diminish ego, for a lot of people, it has does nothing to diminish ego, to a surprising degree. I was actually a little bit disillusioned when I realized how possible it was to drink ayahuasca for years and still have these huge ego complexes. But I guess the simple answer is that for the most part, if you're not predisposed to mental illness, then you can take as much LSD as you want under the right circumstances. It's just a matter of rolling those dice in the first place. And of course, there should be a preparatory period. People need education. People need to know what is required and have someone that can give them the green light in a lot of cases to say, yeah, your traumas are reduced enough and your mind is clear and, and you understand, you know what I mean? Like somebody that can really assess whether that's a safe and wise thing for you to do or not. So yeah, I mean, no good answer exactly. If you meant mentally healthy people, you can never say that it's never going to be a risk for them. You know what I mean? Of course it could be. But mostly not, mostly not. I would not take really, really high doses of LSD alone for the first time. That probably not wise. But yeah, I mean, my opinion about LSD, honestly, is that it's maybe the best psychedelic in some ways. The plant-based psychedelics have an intelligence of their own, it seems like, where they engage the intelligence of the body and the subconscious in a way that we normally don't have access to. It connects us to the universal mind, but in a way that is guided. The problem with LSD is that it is neutral. So it's just you and your neuroses and your psychological disposition and constituents and its constituent elements, and you know what I mean? So it's not as much of a guarantee that you're not going to create a Charles Manson, just amplifying all of the garbage in someone and turning them into a monster. I mean, it's definitely happened at least a couple of times. So then again, not mentally healthy people to start with. So Okay, checking the chat one more time for questions, and then I am going to go plant some peyote. Okay, guys, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope that you turn all of your dreams into nightmares. But then remember that if all of your wishes are granted and all of your dreams are fulfilled, all of your wishes will have been destroyed. Good night.